Next, we have a speaker session by Matthew J. Kraft, Chief Operating Officer of Mosaic Learning, our silver sponsor, who will address the subject, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, how machine learning, artificial intelligence, and neural networks disrupt online learning. Let's welcome him with a big round of applause.
It's like all great things in life, there are four things. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, four tenets of our strategy with machine learning, AI, neural networks, and data, and four tenets to this stool. So I'm very honored and proud to be here with you today to talk about how Mosaic Learning is paving the way for future outcomes education for learners across all spectrums. Okay, before we begin, I want to tell you a few stories. Just a few short stories to kind of kick it off. The first one is about my family. My family came here in the 20th century from political strife in Ukraine, and it took them 2 generations to rebuild what they had. There were no refugee services, there were no re-education services. My late grandfather, my maternal grandfather, drove truck. He did a lot of various things, including selling Fords, to try to make ends meet for my mother and her siblings to put them through school. My father, at age 11 or 12, was sent to a farm. He didn't speak much English at home. He was sent to a farm to help pay rent at home and to pay rent on the farm. The most glorious moment of his life at that time, when he was able to save up enough money to buy a pair of shoes, the soles didn't have a hole in them. And in my own family, when my parents separated and later divorced, my mother made $25,000 a year paying for student loans. She couldn't afford to do that. In fact, my sister and I had a point system. We lived with our grandparents. They stayed with us quite a bit. And we had a point system. And we saved up enough points. Do you know what we got? A can of soda. A can of soda. And finally, in my own life, I was sent to a school called UMark in my early education days in elementary school because the facilities and teaching staff were not available to handle someone who didn't take the beaten path when it came to learning. He learned at a different rate, he memorized everything very quickly, and it was difficult for anyone to be able to teach him. That was me. In high school, I was in multiple different high schools, chasing after advanced placement credits, because my parents couldn't afford to send me to college. I worked full-time, beginning my junior year in high school. I would write code until 2 in the morning for what is now the Web.com group, so I could afford to pay for college. I took multiple AP courses during the same time. I collapsed some of them, passed some of them, and then graduated. My friends in education, what we are doing is broken. It's not that we are broken. It's not that we are wrong. But how we are doing it is wrong. There's an anonymous quote that I have on this chain and on this slide. The key to behaving insanely efficient is minimizing unproductive behavior. For it to take 12 years for me to graduate and 4 years for me to graduate college, what if that could be done in half the time? What if an apprentice, a master apprentice, could get their apprenticeship in 2 years instead of 4? What if in community college I could go to community college and graduate in 1 year instead of 2? What if there were re-education services for people like my family, for immigration and refugees, the people now coming over from Ukraine? What if all of this existed today? Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to take generations to rebuild wealth and we didn't have to choose between paying student loans and putting food on the table? That is what we are about at Mosaic Learning, is taking all of the insanely inefficient things that exist in education today and making them efficient through technology. This is what we call the learning chain. Okay, so here's our agenda. So we talked through the keynote overview. I'm going to give you an overview of Mosaic Learning, talk a little bit about myself. I'm going to review the Industrial Revolution and how, through what I call version 1 through version 4, how it advanced our society and technology. I'm going to talk about Combobulate. This is our enterprise product, award-winning product that literally stands to bring order to chaos and to help accelerate learning outcomes. I'm going to talk about the science of combobulate. We fundamentally look at education differently. We look at learning management systems differently. We do this to make a difference and to improve outcomes. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to talk about predictive modeling, the immediate feedback loop as a differentiator in what we do with combobulate. I'm going to talk about how that then feeds into the learning wallet, what the learning wallet is. And then I'm going to introduce you to what we're calling the learning chain, the industry's first blockchain technology for learning. And then I'll close, and we'll do some Q&A. All right? All right. The fourth industrial revolution changes everything. So let's talk about what the fourth industrial revolution is. So if you look at supply chains, if you look at e-commerce, you look at currency, like cryptocurrency, they have fundamentally changed the way our society behaves. And if you look at 5, 10, 15 years from now, how everything will be different, it is because of what we are now going through as we describe the fourth industrial revolution. I did not come up with this term. I've heard it many, many times from my former CEO, Robert Smith, head of Vista Equity Partners, really describing how what we are doing in terms of the investments we're making in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and we've talked about so far, are advancing every facet of our society at the fastest rate in human history. And so if you look at supply chain management, you look at the ability for Amazon delivery drivers to get me a package to this hotel within 2 hours. You look at other things in terms of just-in-time inventory management and supply chains across the country, and how we're able to have parts, pre-COVID, in place when they need to be. That is all about how we're advancing through the use of adaptive behaviors in models to anticipate when things are needed and deliver them when they are needed, instead of having massive supplies of inventory on hand. E-commerce is benefiting similarly. If you look at what I used to do on Amazon, what we used to do on Amazon as a family, we would spend many, many hours, even holiday shopping, looking through and scrolling through many, many, many things that we could possibly want. It's almost like what I remember growing up, you know, the big Sears catalog and looking through all the things in there, except it was doing it online. We're no longer doing that. I log into Amazon now, my children log into Amazon now, and everything that they could possibly want is right in front of them. I need an air filter. It knows exactly what I need. I need to order groceries for the house. It knows exactly what I need. Last holiday season, my children got these types of gifts. Wouldn't it be great if they now got these types of gifts? And so, again, this is all about data and artificial intelligence, machine learning. In fact, using the same platforms that we are leveraging at Mosaic Learning, or similar platforms, now the fourth industrial revolution is driving e-commerce. And then currency. I'm going to say something that is a little bit of heresy in the context of the current situation around cryptocurrency and that type of thing. I believe cryptocurrency is the wave of the future. The Chinese have issued a digital yuan. The Federal Reserve and the Treasury are studying a digital dollar. And Bitcoin, I think, is here to stay. There are certainly many other types of cryptocurrency that may phase out, just like in the late 1990s, there were many, e-pets and things like that that didn't survive. But in general, the ability to have an immutable ledger and a lack of ability to counterfeit as a permanent form of commerce is something that I believe is going to be here to stay and something that is going to change how we interact in commerce, almost like the issuance of the dollar changed how dollar and other forms of currency changed bartering many centuries ago. And so this then brings us to online learning. What is disrupting online learning today? During COVID, many billions of dollars were funneled into online learning to basically take the same, what I call single variable equation. You can imagine a multivariable calculus equation with a single variable. We took a single variable equation and put it online. We said, instead of the instructor delivering instruction in person, he or she is now going to deliver it online, and everything's going to be better, right? Everything's going to be better. Who in this room had kids during COVID studying on Zoom and Google Classroom and said, now everything's better? Is it better? I think it was not. Like, I look at my children, and and there are certain advantages of having education back, but in my experience, the actual delivery of the material was not improved. It was just taking the same fundamental system and putting it online. And so what we do at Mosaic Learning is different, because what we're doing is changing the nature of the problem. we're asking the question, how can we make this better? How can we make this fundamentally different? And how can we improve the outcomes of everyone in the system so that the teachers get more immediate feedback, the students get more immediate feedback, and everything is actionable? And so that's how the fourth industrial revolution, how we're advancing it at Mosaic Learning, is changing everything. Let's talk a little bit about who Mosaic Learning is. We were founded in 2007 in Columbia, Maryland, or based in Columbia, Maryland. We were actually further south of that at the time. We were a finalist in an international VR competition in Dubai, recognized by Howard County's State of Business for Growth and Community Impact in 2020, featured on ABC News daytime broadcast in January 21, and recognized by AWS's Business Development for its inspirational story last year as well. Through our LMS products, we serve hundreds of thousands of learners a year, and over 5 million students have been served. In 2015, we created a single platform out of combobulating many different platforms together, and we rebranded it Combobulate in 2019. Combobulate literally stands for combining learning, bringing something out of disarray, and in our case, includes virtual reality, artificial reality, web, mobile interfaces with a unified student and visual interface platform. Before we go into Combobulate, I want to just take a few moments to talk a little about who we are, because it's important that you understand not just what we're doing, but what we're all about. And so at Mosaic Learning, our vision is to improve learning outcomes for all. Our mission is very simple. It's to fuse technology and ingenuity to bridge all barriers, connecting people and unleashing individual and organizational potential. Individual and organizational potential. Again, unleashing what is there and putting it on a path to success. I'm not going to read through this, but I just wanted to quickly touch on our values, because it's very important when you're doing business with folks that you understand not just what they're offering you, but what their values are, because their values drive who they are, their values drive who they produce, and their values drive what they are about. And so without reading through this, I'll just hit them at a high level. Forward motion, ownership, results, group, and embrace adversity. About me, and this picture looks like I had a little bit too much coffee that morning, but let's talking a little bit about me. I've got over 25 years of industry experience. Really focused a lot on product innovation and operational excellence over the last 2 decades and a half. I joined Mosaic Learning in May of 2019. Managed the day-to-day operations and the business overall. Prior to this, I served as Vice President of Engineering at Social Solutions Global and now Bonatera, focusing on, in large part, through reference to outcomes and a software package called Apricot, how to take student data and marry it with mental health data to improve student outcomes in learning as well, but again, different tilt by focusing on how to better treat and really manage case management of mental health. And then prior to that, I held senior roles at Straighterline. Straighterline is one of the top leading providers of alternative degree accreditation pathways online. And so in other words, instead of going to community college, you take your equivalency online and then transfer to a number of partner schools, Kraft Media Services in Atlanta, advertising.com group at AOL, which AOL and Yahoo have gone through many, many ownership transactions over the years. And again, in high school as an early stage employee of the web.com group. In 2005, I graduated with a degree in management from GSU in Atlanta. All right, so we talked about it and touched on it earlier, but let's talk about the Industrial Revolution. And so if you think about how our society changed, since really the end of the Revolutionary War to today, what we've done with very basic and rudimentary machines, now advancing to machine learning, we've helped to enable product availability and efficiency. We've lowered prices, we've improved standard of living, and improved education. And so if you look at the various phases of that, as we went from mechanized steam power to mass production, assembly line, and energy, to, at the end of the space race, automation, computers, and electronics, to today when we're looking at the Internet of Things, which has been featured at another one of the conferences here, to cyber security systems, networks, and now again, artificial intelligence, machine learning, networks, and data underpinning all of it in terms of a strategy. Okay, so combobulate is different. And there are lots of words on the slides in terms of how we break everything up. But if you can imagine a traditional LMS system modernized and built largely from the ground up, we combine everything. We take data, we take the user interface, whether it's on a mobile app, whether it's 2D, whether it's what we call 360-degree VR, which we'll talk about a little bit later. In the future, we'll put behavioral science at the center of virtual reality, whether it's our live classroom, Meet product, built on top of Amazon technologies to compete directly with Zoom, and all of the things that make a learning management system great. We bring it all together, and that's what is in front of the learner. That is what is in front of the instructor. Whether it's what we call computer-mediated learning, where it's largely self-paced, or whether it's instructor-led, the experience is the same, the platform is the same, the data analytics are the same. Regardless of the device, everything is fed in, it is centralized, it is actioned on, and it's one user interface through multiple different devices for the student. And that's what makes Combobulate great. Talking a little bit about the science of Combobulate, again, if you want a learning management system, and I hate to say it like this, I can refer you to a number of our competitors. There's Blackboard, a lot of different solutions exist in the marketplace. From my perspective, part of what makes Combobulate great, again, is we fundamentally answer the question differently. We look at the problem differently. We take data science, and a lot of this is sort of forward-looking, looking at cognitive science, again, for example, in virtual reality, changing environmental factors and how they interface and interact with the learner's experience. So for example, does the outcome change if I'm in an 80-degree room versus a 60-degree room, if I have a pair of VR goggles, headset on, and hand controls? If there's sort of a factory simulation, in other words, I'm around, let's say, pumpkin spice, one of my favorite things is for Thanksgiving. Does that change the outcome? You start thinking about these various different things that can sort of feed in. You start running experiments. What optimizes the experience for the learner? And this is where we're headed. And then you look at a lot of the cognitive science behind that as well. So for example, with cognition, how fundamentally through an fMRI study am I taking the information in, am I actioning on it based on the device I'm using? And then, oh, by the way, let's say I have anxiety. Let's say I have diagnosed ADHD. Well, how am I reordering the questions on the screen, feeding the data in real time to accommodate learners that, for example, need a very different way of interfacing with the system. They need a very different way of interfacing with the questions on the screen, the content that's being displayed, that's chunking it up differently so they're not getting overwhelmed and either entering a state of either panic or emotional dysregulation. And again, with all the data behind it, populating data lakes for students and activity and feeding it all into a central system. This is what we call the beginnings of the learning chain, capturing all the data about a student and making it immediately actionable or actionable within a reasonable period of time. I have to correct that or my DevOps people are going to be very upset. They'll come out of the screen. Actioning that within a given period of time to optimize the experience for the learner. And this talks a little bit about, it gets a little bit technical, but I want to focus first on the top box, which is students. This is a generic term, but right now at Mosaic Learning, we are looking at student populations across the entire spectrum. We are partnering with folks like EOC Solutions to run betas and trials in several cities in the state of Missouri with 70,000 inmates of how we do remedial education and job training for union jobs to prevent recidivism. We're looking at and partnering with and in discussions with refugee services to say, if I'm an electrician in the Ukraine, how do I come back into the system? How do I take remedial courses? How do I then use those to get a job? And so we're not in the same situation of my family, which took multiple generations just to get our feet back from where we were before. We're taking student populations in what's called interim credentials in high schools. We're then feeding that into the system. We're taking folks that shouldn't go to college, that should go on a VOTEC path, not because they're not qualified to do that, but because accumulating $100,000 in student loan debt to make $40,000 a year is an upside-down equation versus accumulating no student loan debt to make over $100,000 a year as a journeyman electrician is a much better ROI. To build out the future of the infrastructure in this country, these people are needed. And it solves a huge societal problem of $1 trillion in outstanding student loan debt, half of which or 40% of which is owned by people who never graduated college. We're feeding all this into the system with Amazon serverless technologies underpinning it to basically take the same buckets of data feed them into decision-making technologies like SageMaker, running scripts, running predictive models, for example, in R and Python, coming up with a model, feeding it to a web browser. JavaScript is then querying that result and then changing changing what's on the screen and adapting the experience to the learner. Again, what I'm presenting to you is a vision of the future. I'm presenting to you the vision of the roadmap that we are going down and the path that we have started with Combobulate 2 years ago and the path that we will continue with Combobulate in the next 2 to 5 years. Fast forward to the Learning Wallet. Some of this exists today, some of this is roadmap for next year. What exists today is what we call our learning record store of a system, which is the ability to basically say, here's an entire history of my transcript. Here's what then maps to my courses, then maps to my completion, then maps to my pre-apprenticeship. Oh, and by the way, if I need to or want to, I can share that, but that record belongs to me. So this is what we call, and I'll touch on it in a minute as we get to the actual big portion of the presentation, we talk about the learning chain and the blockchain technology, but this gets back to what I call the solution to modernizing FERPA, which is that the data belongs to the student. The data is accessible to the student. The student owns the data, and the student is able to action and view the data. No longer are transcripts, no longer are student records stored in disparate systems. They are stored with the student, and they belong to the student, actioned by the student, and capable by the student. All right, let's talk about the learning chain. We saved the best for last. I'm going to stand for this one. Imagine this is your entire life, your entire learning journey mapped to your profession, owned by you, decentralized, available, transparent, immutable, and encrypted. This is the learning chain. Over the next couple of years, we'll partner with companies like Amazon and BTCS for validation of a blockchain. We'll ask others that are in our journey with us to join our chain and to add to it to create the first industry standard for blockchain in learning. Closing remarks. So I'm going to sit again. What we have presented today is a vision of where we are today, where we have been in the past, and where we will be in the future. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, because things that are important are worth repeating. There are many different technologies, there are many different platforms, there are many different learning management systems that I can refer you to today that we compete directly against. But nothing can do what Combobulate can do. No company on the planet can do what Mosaic Learning can do. And no company on the planet has the vision that we have today to take everything that has been created and to create the industry-first learning chain, whether it's your learning wallet or your learning blockchain. We will create new pathways for students. We'll create new ways to employment. We'll create new paths for all of the people in society that are getting left behind or drowning in student loan debt. We'll create enormous societal impact. And so I ask you today to come with us on this journey. I ask you to stop by our booth. I ask you to join us because what we're doing is fundamentally different than what everyone else is doing today. And with that, I'll take questions. It seems we've ran out of time. We actually ended right on time. So if you have any questions, stop by our booth. Feel free to have a conversation with us. We'll be here tonight, too. I think there's another cocktail hour. And then always available online, too. Feel free to LinkedIn me, Matthew Kraft. Reach out through Mosaic Learning. All right? Thank you.